My name is Ethan Walker, and for 15 years I thought I had it all figured out. A small construction company with 12 loyal employees, a modest house in the suburbs, and Jessica, my wife, who I believed was my partner in every sense of the word. But life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. This is the story of how a single motel receipt unraveled everything I thought I knew, forcing me to face a truth I wasn't ready for. It's not a hero's tale, it's just mine, raw and real, and it starts with a night that broke me. It was our 15th wedding anniversary, and I'd booked a table at Centennial Steakhouse, the same place we'd gone every year since our first date. The familiar smell of grilled meat and polished wood greeted me as I sat down, adjusting my tie, feeling a little out of place in my best jacket. I'd been looking forward to this night for weeks, a chance to reconnect with Jessica, who'd been distant lately. Her marketing job had her working late, and her new yoga obsession meant she was out 5 nights a week instead of the usual 2. I chalked it up to stress, maybe a midlife crisis at 38. I didn't push. I trusted her. The table was set for 2, a small candle flickering between the empty plates. I ordered a glass of red wine and waited, checking my phone. 7 p.m. turned to 7:15, then 7:30. The waitress, Sarah, a young woman with kind eyes, refilled my water twice, her smile tinged with pity. "She's probably stuck in traffic," I said, more to myself than to her. Sarah nodded, but I could feel her gaze lingering as she walked away. By 7:45, the restaurant's hum of conversation felt like static in my head. I texted Jessica, *, "Hey, you almost here?" No reply. I called her, my thumb hesitating over the button before I pressed it. The phone rang twice before connecting. For a split second, I heard her laugh. Sharp, carefree, the kind she hadn't given me in months. Then, a man's voice, low and unfamiliar, chuckled in the background. The line went dead. My chest tightened, like someone had wrapped a chain around my ribs and yanked. I stared at the phone, willing it to ring again, to give me an explanation. Nothing. I paid for the wine, left a tip, and walked out, the weight of Sarah's sympathetic glance following me to the parking lot. Driving home, my mind raced. Was she hurt? Was it a misunderstanding? I clung to those thoughts, but a darker one kept creeping in, one I didn't want to name. Jessica's phone was always face down now. Her passwords changed a few months back. She'd started wearing perfume again, something she hadn't done since our early years. I'd ignored it all, telling myself it was nothing. But that laugh, that man's voice, they weren't nothing. When I got home, the house was dark, Jessica's car absent from the driveway. I poured a glass of whiskey and sat at the kitchen table, the silence pressing against my ears. Her purse was on the counter, left behind from the morning. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe desperation, maybe instinct. My fingers brushed past her wallet, a pack of gum, a receipt. I pulled it out, a crumpled piece of paper from Mountain View Lodge, a cheap motel an hour outside town. 3 nights, $89 each, 2 guests. The dates matched a girls' trip she'd taken 2 weeks ago with her friend Sarah. My stomach churned. I called Sarah, the Sarah who wasn't a waitress, Jessica's co-worker. Her voice was groggy. It was past 9 p.m. "Ethan, everything okay?" I asked about the trip, keeping my tone light, casual. There was a pause. Too long. "Trip. I didn't go anywhere with Jess," she said. She told me she was visiting her sister. The chain around my chest tightened again. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the receipt. The words, 2 guests, burned into my eyes. I don't remember how long I sat there, the whiskey untouched, the receipt in my hand. My fingers trembled, not from anger, but from a hollow kind of fear. 15 years, late nights building my company, vacations we'd saved for. The miscarriage we'd grieved together flashed through my mind. Was it all a lie? I thought of her laugh on the phone, That man's voice. I thought of the yoga classes, the locked phone, the perfume. Each memory felt like a puzzle piece snapping into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. I walked to the bedroom, our bedroom, and stood in the doorway. Her side of the bed was neat, untouched, like she hadn't slept there in days. My side was a mess, sheets tangled from restless nights, a half-read book on construction law gathering dust. I'd lost 6 pounds in the last month, stress carving lines into my face. The mirror showed a man I barely recognized, 40 years old, dark circles under his eyes, calluses on his hands from years of work. I'd built a life for us, brick by brick, and now it felt like sand slipping through my fingers. I went back to the kitchen, the receipt still in my hand. My phone buzzed, a text from Jessica. Asterisk. Sorry, work thing ran late. Home soon. No mention of the restaurant, no apology for standing me up. I didn't reply. Instead, I poured the whiskey down the sink, the amber liquid swirling away like the trust I'd once had. I sat down, the receipt on the table, and asked myself the question I'd been avoiding. What do I do now? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was. Jessica didn't know about a habit I'd kept since business school, a small thing that might just save me from falling apart completely. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was survival. The receipt from Mountain View Lodge sat on my kitchen table like a grenade with the pin pulled. Jessica's text. Sorry, work thing ran late. Home soon. Glowed on my phone. A lie I could no longer ignore. I was Ethan Walker, 40, a man who'd spent 15 years building a life with a woman I thought I knew. Now, I was staring at the wreckage of that life, my hands still trembling from the truth I'd uncovered. But Jessica didn't know about a habit I'd picked up in business school, a small discipline that would keep me from crumbling. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start fighting back. I couldn't stay in the house. The walls felt like they were closing in. Every photo of us, mocking me. I grabbed my keys, a 6-pack of Coors, and our old wedding album, then drove an hour to Blue Mesa, a quiet lake where I'd fished as a kid. I rented a cabin for $75 a night, a creaky wooden place with a sagging porch and a view of the water. No Wi-Fi, no distractions, just me, my thoughts, and the weight of what I'd learned. I sat on the porch, cracked a beer, and opened the album. Our wedding day stared back. Jessica in her white dress, her smile wide and real. Me, 25 and cocky, thinking love was enough to conquer anything. I traced her face with my thumb, and for the first time in years I let myself cry. Not a quiet sob, but a raw, choking mess. Like a kid who'd lost everything. The tears stung, but they felt honest, and I didn't try to stop them. As the night deepened, the beer cans piled up, and my mind wandered to a memory of my dad, a gruff contractor who'd taught me more about life than business. Ethan, he'd said before my wedding, a prenup isn't about distrust. It's about protecting what you both build. I'd laughed it off, but Jessica and I signed one anyway, a 2-page document we buried in a safe deposit box and forgot. It was a simple clause. Infidelity meant the guilty party got nothing but personal belongings. Back then, it felt like a formality. Now, it was my lifeline. By morning, my head throbbed, but the fog of grief had lifted just enough for clarity. I couldn't confront Jessica yet. Not without proof, not without a plan. I called Marcus Cole, my best friend since college, and a divorce lawyer who'd seen it all. He answered on the second ring, his voice steady but concerned. Ethan, you sound like hell. What's going on? I told him everything, the receipt, the man's voice, Sarah's confusion about the girls' trip. Marcus didn't sugarcoat it. You need hard evidence, man. Courts don't care about your gut. I know a guy, Dan Peterson, a PI. He's discreet, $200 a day. You in? I didn't hesitate. Do it. Dan was a former cop, mid-50s, with a handshake like a vice and eyes that missed nothing. He met me at a diner near my construction site. A greasy spot called Rusty's, where the coffee burned your throat. Over a plate of cold fries, I handed him the receipt and Jessica's schedule. Follow her, I said. I need to know who he is. Dan nodded, jotting notes. Give me a week. Stay calm, Ethan. Don't tip her off. I agreed, though calm felt like a foreign country. That week was torture. Jessica came home each night, her routine unchanged, yoga, work, a quick kiss on my cheek before she scrolled her phone in bed. I played along, asking about her day, swallowing the bile in my throat when she lied about yoga classes or client dinners. I lost another 3 pounds, my appetite gone, my sleep fractured by nightmares of her with someone else. At work, my crew noticed my distraction, missed deadlines, a snapped pencil during a budget meeting. But I brushed it off. Walker Construction was my pride, a small outfit with $340,000 in assets, and I'd be damned if I let this ruin it. Dan called on day 6. Got something, he said. We met at Rusty's again, and he slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were photos. Jessica leaving a gym with a man, his arm around her waist, the two of them at Mountain View Lodge, her hand in his. The man was Blake Harrison, 35, a personal trainer with a rap sheet, petty theft, a dismissed assault charge, and a history of cozying up to married women with money. Dan's report was brutal. Blake was bleeding Jessica dry. $18,000 in charges on our joint credit card for gifts and motel stays. He'd even proposed to her after 2 months, likely eyeing a cut of our assets post-divorce. He's a leech, Dan said. Your wife's not his first mark. I stared at the photos, my jaw tight. Jessica looked happy, her eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen in years. It hurt more than I expected, not just the betrayal, but the realization that I'd lost her long before Blake. I thanked Dan, paid his $1,400 fee, and drove back to Blue Mesa. Alone on the porch, I burned one of the photos in an ashtray, watching Blake's smug face curl into ash. I wasn't ready to feel anger yet. Grief was still too heavy. But something else stirred. Resolve. Then, Jessica texted, "Asterisk, we need to talk." My pulse spiked, but I kept my response short. Asterisk, sure, tomorrow, 7 p.m., house. She called instead, her voice nervous. Ethan, I think we should separate. I leaned against the cabin wall, the lake glinting under the moon. If that's what you want, I said, my tone flat, we'll file for divorce. She paused, clearly thrown by my calm. You're okay with that? I almost laughed. Okay? I was drowning. But I said, yeah, Jess, I'm done fighting. She didn't know about the prenup. Didn't know I'd already hired Marcus to draft papers. In Colorado, assets split 50 without a prenup, and Jessica probably thought she'd walk away with half my company, half our house, $120,000 in equity, at least. Blake was likely banking on it, too. But that forgotten document, signed 15 years ago, was about to change everything. I wasn't gloating. Not yet. I was just surviving one calculated step at a time. Marcus met me the next morning, his office a cluttered mess of legal pads and coffee mugs. You're playing this smart, he said, reviewing Dan's report. The prenup's ironclad, and Blake's history gives us leverage. Jessica's in deep, but she doesn't see it. I nodded, my hands clasped tight to stop the shaking. What's next? Marcus leaned back. We set a meeting with her lawyer. You stay cool, let the evidence do the talking. I left his office with a plan, but no peace. Jessica thought she held all the cards, thought her lies were airtight. She'd forgotten one small detail, a piece of paper that would shift the game in my favor. As I drove home, her text lit up my phone again. Asterisk tomorrow, then. I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't reply. I was done with sorry. The meeting was coming, and with it, a truth she'd never see coming. The day of the lawyer meeting arrived like a storm I'd been bracing for. I was Ethan Walker, 40, a man who'd built a life brick by brick. Walker Construction, a small company worth $340,000, a house with $120,000 in equity, 15 years of marriage to Jessica, now crumbling under the weight of her betrayal. I'd found the motel receipt, hired a PI, and uncovered her affair with Blake Harrison, a manipulative personal trainer bleeding her dry. Armed with a forgotten prenup and evidence from Dan Peterson, I was ready to face her. Jessica thought she held the upper hand, but she was about to learn how wrong she was. Marcus Cole, my best friend and divorce lawyer, had set the meeting at his office, a no-frills space in a strip mall with chipped paint and a buzzing fluorescent light. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, like Marcus. He'd reviewed the prenup, a 2-page document Jessica and I signed 15 years ago, stating that infidelity meant the guilty party walked away with nothing but personal belongings. "This is your ace," Marcus said, tapping the paper. "She doesn't remember it, and her lawyer's clueless." I nodded, my stomach churning. I wasn't here for revenge. Not really. I just wanted to protect what I'd built and walk away with some shred of dignity. Jessica arrived at 10 a.m., her lawyer, a wiry man named Greg Altman, at her side. She wore a navy blazer and skirt, her hair pulled back, trying to look composed. But her eyes were red, her fingers fidgeting with her purse strap. She wouldn't meet my gaze, staring instead at the table where Marcus had laid out a manila folder. Greg, all business, opened with a standard spiel about Colorado's equitable distribution laws, assuming we'd split everything 50-50. The house, my company, our savings. "We're aiming for amicable," he said, glancing at Jessica. She nodded, but her jaw was tight, like she was bracing for a fight. Marcus leaned back, casual but sharp. "Before we talk splits, let's clear something up." He opened the folder and slid a stack of photos across the table. Jessica's breath caught as she saw the first one, her and Blake Harrison, arm in arm, leaving Mountain View Lodge. The next showed them at the gym, her laughing as he whispered in her ear. Then a credit card statement. $18,000 in charges for motel stays, dinners, and gifts Blake had coaxed out of her. Greg's eyebrows shot up, but he recovered quickly. "This doesn't change the financials," he said. "Colorado's no-fault divorce state." Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that says he's holding a winning hand. "Sure, but this does." He placed the prenup on the table, its edges yellowed from years in a safe deposit box. Signed by both parties, notarized June 12, 2010. Clause 4B. Infidelity nullifies any claim to marital assets for the guilty party. He paused, letting the words sink in. "Jessica, you signed this. Ethan's company, the house, the savings, they're his." Jessica's face drained of color. She grabbed the document, her hands shaking as she scanned it. I don't remember this," she whispered. Greg snatched it, reading frantically, his confidence crumbling. "This wasn't disclosed in discovery," he stammered, but Marcus cut him off. "It's been in Ethan's possession since the wedding." "You can verify the signatures." Jessica's eyes darted to me, wide with panic. "Ethan, I didn't mean for this." I leaned forward, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "You didn't mean for what, Jess? The motel? The $18,000 you spent on him? Or the lies about yoga? Your girls' trip?" I slid another photo across, a grainy still from Dan's surveillance, Blake slipping a ring onto her finger outside a coffee shop. 2 months, and he's proposing. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Greg tried to interject, but Jessica's hand shot up, silencing him. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't know it would go this far." Her eyes were wet. But I saw something else. Fear, maybe regret, but not enough to undo the damage. I wanted to believe her, to see the woman I'd loved for 15 years. But all I saw was the stranger who'd traded our life for a conman's promises. Marcus kept the pressure on, laying out Dan's report on Blake. "Harrison's got a pattern," he said. 3 other women, all married, all drained financially before he moved on. He's got $800 a month in child support arrears, a repossessed car, and a landlord suing him for back rent. He saw Jessica as a paycheck. Jessica flinched, her hands curling into fists. "That's not true," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I watched her unravel, a mix of anger and pity twisting in my chest. She'd been my partner, my confidant, the woman who'd held my hand through a miscarriage, who'd laughed with me over cheap wine on our porch. But she'd also spent our money on Blake, lied to my face, and planned a future with him while I sat alone at Centennial Steakhouse. I wanted to scream, to ask why, but I didn't. Instead, I said, 15 years, Jess. That's 5,475 days. Each one a chance to choose me. You didn't. She broke then, a sob escaping as she pressed a hand to her mouth. Greg tried to steer things back to negotiation, suggesting a settlement despite the prenup. But I shook my head. No deals, I said. She gets her clothes, her car, and her personal accounts. That's it. Marcus backed me up, citing the prenup's clarity and the evidence of infidelity. Greg blustered about appealing, but his heart wasn't in it. The meeting ended with no agreement, just a promise to reconvene after Greg reviewed the documents. As Jessica stood to leave, she looked at me, her voice barely audible. Can we talk? Just us? I studied her face, searching for something to hold on to, a trace of the woman I'd married. But all I saw was the weight of her choices. There's nothing left to say, I replied. She nodded, tears streaming, and walked out, Greg trailing behind. Marcus clapped a hand on my shoulder as the door closed. You did good, man. Kept it together. I didn't feel good. I felt hollow, like I'd won a battle, but lost something irreplaceable. I drove home, the photos and prenup in a folder on the passenger seat. The house was quiet, Jessica's perfume still lingering in the air. I poured a glass of water, my hands steady now, and sat at the kitchen table where I'd found the receipt. The fight wasn't over. Blake was still out there, and Jessica's desperation could make things messy. But for the first time in weeks, I felt in control. I opened my laptop and emailed Dan, asking him to keep tabs on Blake. If he was planning to use Jessica to get to me, I'd be ready. The prenup was my shield, but Blake's desperation could make him unpredictable. As I hit send, my phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Asterisk, I didn't know he was using me. Please, Ethan. Let's fix this. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Then I locked the phone and set it down. Fixing this wasn't my job anymore. The meeting had stripped away the last of my illusions, leaving only the truth. Jessica had chosen Blake, and I'd chosen myself. But Blake wasn't done yet, and what happened next would push me to a place I never expected, a place where survival meant facing danger head-on. The lawyer meeting had gutted me, but it also set me free. I was Ethan Walker, 40, a man who'd built Walker Construction from nothing, a company worth $340,000, in a home with $120,000 in equity. Jessica, my wife of 15 years, had thrown it all away for Blake Harrison, a personal trainer who'd manipulated her out of $18,000 and into a fantasy of a new life. With a prenup and hard evidence from my PI, Dan Peterson, I'd protected my assets, leaving Jessica with nothing but her car and clothes. But Blake wasn't the type to walk away quietly, and what happened next pushed me into a confrontation I never saw coming. A week after the meeting, Jessica was out of the house, crashing at a friend's place. I'd changed the locks, not out of spite, but necessity. Dan's reports showed Blake was spiraling. His latest scheme had fallen apart when Jessica's credit card was declined at an Applebee's, where they'd argued over a $42 tab. Dan's contact, a waitress there, overheard Jessica snap, "You said you'd take care of me." Blake's response was a hissed, "You're useless now." She'd stormed out, leaving him with the bill he couldn't pay. Dan warned me Blake was desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. I tried to focus on work, bidding on a $2.2 million community center project in Stone Creek. My crew noticed my distraction, missed measurements, short replies, but they didn't push. I was leaner now, down 10 pounds since finding the motel receipt, my face etched with stress. Sleep came in fits, broken by the creak of the house or the hum of my phone. I kept Dan on retainer, his updates my only anchor in the chaos. Blake had been evicted from his apartment, his car impounded for unpaid tickets. He was couch surfing, drinking heavily, and asking mutual acquaintances about me. "He's fixating," Dan texted. "Watch your back." It was a Thursday night, 11 p.m., when it happened. I was home, sorting invoices at the kitchen table, a single lamp casting shadows on the walls. The house felt too big without Jessica's things, her books gone from the shelves, her perfume no longer in the air. I heard a faint scrape, like metal on wood, from the back door. My pulse spiked. I stood, grabbing my phone, and moved to the hallway, where I could see the door. The knob jiggled, then stopped. Silence. I waited, barely breathing, until I heard it again. A low creak as the door eased open. I backed into the garage, my hand closing around a crowbar from my toolbox. The garage was dark, the air thick with the smell of oil and sawdust. I dialed 911, whispering my address to the dispatcher. "Someone's breaking in," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Hurry." She told me to stay safe, stay hidden. I crouched behind my truck, the crowbar heavy in my hand, listening as footsteps shuffled into the kitchen. A voice, Blake's, slurred and angry, muttered, "Where is it?" Glass clinked, a drawer slammed. I realized he was looking for something, money, valuables, maybe the prenup he thought he could destroy. My blood ran cold when I heard a new sound, a knife being pulled from the block on the counter. I tightened my grip on the crowbar, calculating my odds. I wasn't a fighter, but I'd worked construction my whole life. I knew how to swing. The garage door to the kitchen was still cracked open, and I saw him then, Blake, swaying, a kitchen knife in one hand, a beer bottle in the other. His face was gaunt, eyes wild, nothing like the polished trainer in Dan's photos. He was unraveling, and I was his target. I stayed low, praying the police were close. But then, headlights swept through the front windows. Jessica's car, pulling into the driveway. My stomach dropped. She was here to pick up the last of her things, unaware of the danger inside. I heard the front door unlock, Jessica's voice calling, "Ethan, you home?" Blake froze, then turned toward the sound, the knife glinting in the lamplight. I didn't think. I moved. I pushed through the garage door, crowbar raised, and shouted, "Jessica, get out!" She screamed, dropping her keys as Blake spun toward me, the knife slashing wildly. I dodged, the blade grazing my forearm, a shallow cut that burned like hell. I swung the crowbar, catching his wrist. The knife clattered to the floor, and Blake stumbled, cursing. Jessica backed toward the door, her face pale, eyes locked on Blake. "What are you doing here?" she stammered. He lunged at her, but I tackled him, pinning him to the ground. He thrashed, reeking of booze, but I held him down, my knee on his chest. "Stay still," I growled, my arm throbbing. Jessica was crying, frozen by the door, as sirens finally wailed in the distance. The police arrived minutes later, 2 officers cuffing Blake as he spat insults. "She owes me," he slurred, glaring at Jessica. The cops found the knife, a stolen bottle of my whiskey, and a half-written note in his pocket, a rambling plan to ruin me by spreading lies about my company. They booked him for breaking and entering, assault, and possession of a weapon. He'd face 30 days in jail, maybe more if I pressed charges. I gave my statement, the cut on my arm bandaged by a paramedic. Jessica hovered nearby, silent, her hands shaking. When the cops left, she turned to me, tears streaming. "Ethan, I didn't know he'd do this. I thought he loved me." Her voice broke, and for a moment, I saw the Jessica I'd married, vulnerable, lost. But I also saw the truth. She'd brought this into our home, into my life. "You need to go," I said, my tone flat. "Take your stuff and don't come back." She nodded, grabbing a box of clothes from the hallway, and left without another word. I sat on the porch as her taillights faded, the night air cool against my skin. The cut on my arm stung, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. I'd protected myself, my home, my future. But at what cost? Blake was gone, for now, but the damage he and Jessica had done lingered. I bandaged my arm properly, the blood seeping through the gauze, and checked the locks twice before sitting at the kitchen table. My phone buzzed. Dan, checking in. You okay? He texted. I replied, alive. Thanks. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't home anymore. It was a shell, like me. I thought of Jessica's face when she saw Blake with the knife, the shock of realizing who he really was. I didn't hate her, not exactly. I pitied her. But pity wasn't love, and I was done carrying her mistakes. Blake's arrest was a small victory, but I knew he'd be out in a month, maybe less. I'd be ready, whatever came next. As dawn broke, I poured a coffee and stared at the prenup, still on the table from the lawyer meeting. It had saved me, but it couldn't undo the past. Jessica was gone, Blake was in custody, and I was alone, but alive. A year later, I'd get an email from her, a final thread to cut. But that night, I just sat, the weight of survival settling in, knowing the hardest part was still ahead. A year after the divorce, I was no longer the Ethan Walker who'd sat alone at Centennial Steakhouse, clutching a motel receipt. I was 41, leaner, grayer, but standing taller. Walker Construction had landed a $2.2 million contract to build the Stone Creek Community Center, a project that gave my 12-person crew purpose and kept me grounded. The house, once heavy with Jessica's absence, was just a place to sleep now. I'd survived her betrayal, Blake Harrison's knife, and the hollow ache of starting over. Then, one morning, an email from Jessica arrived, a ghost from a life I'd left behind. The email was short. Asterisk Ethan, I saw the Stone Creek announcement. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry. Again, for everything. I stared at the screen, my coffee going cold. Part of me wanted to delete it, to keep the door to that pain shut. But I'd changed, and so had my perspective. I typed back, asterisk, thanks. I hope you find happiness. No anger, no lingering resentment, just closure. I hit send and closed the laptop, ready to move on. Work had become my anchor. The Stone Creek project paired me with Sophia Diaz, a 38-year-old architect and single mom whose designs were sharp and practical, like her. We'd meet over blueprints, her quick wit cutting through my focus. You ever smile, Ethan? She'd tease, and I'd grunt, but her laugh was infectious. She didn't pry about my past, and I didn't volunteer it. But we clicked. Two people who'd been through enough to value honesty over flash. Her daughter, Mia, 8, would sometimes tag along, doodling on spare plans. One day, Mia dropped her ice cream on my shirt, giggling as I faked a scowl. Sophia's warm eyes met mine, and I felt something I hadn't in years. Possibility. Meanwhile, Blake Harrison reached out from jail, a letter scrawled on lined paper. Asterisk. I messed up, Ethan. I'm getting help. Let me make it right. I didn't owe him anything. His knife had left a scar on my arm, a faint line I'd carry forever. But I believed in second chances, not for him, but for the man I wanted to be. I offered him a job when he got out. Basic labor, no trust until he earned it. It wasn't forgiveness, it was a test. For both of us. Jessica called a week before Blake's release, her voice tight. Ethan, he's getting out soon. Be careful. I told her I'd already spoken to him, that I was giving him a chance to rebuild. She went quiet, then said, You're a better person than I was. I didn't argue. She was trying, maybe finding her own peace. I wished her well and hung up, the past finally feeling like the past. The Stone Creek opening was a crisp fall day, the air sharp with promise. The community center gleamed, clean lines, warm wood, Sophia's vision brought to life by my crew. I stood with her and Mia, watching kids run through the new playground. Mia tugged my sleeve, pointing to a mural she'd helped paint. It's awesome, right? She said. I nodded, catching Sophia's smile. We weren't a couple, not yet, but the quiet moments, her hand brushing mine, our shared glances, felt like a beginning. As the crowd clapped for the ribbon cutting, I stepped back, taking it in. This was my life now. Work that mattered, people who saw me a future I could shape. Jessica's betrayal had cracked me open, but what grew back was stronger. Happiness wasn't about erasing the pain. It was about building something better from the pieces. I looked at Sophia, laughing with Mia. and knew I was exactly where I was meant to be.